It's Mike again, back for the second Stories That Matter interview, where I get to talk to business owners, freelancers, people you've never heard of, talking about their business and what it means to them and where they think they're going in the future. I'm speaking today to Meg Kendall, who's a copywriter and strategist, but specialist in climate tech companies. She's a wonderful example of how specialization in a business works. So let's get into the conversation.
Here we go. So, good afternoon, good evening for me, good afternoon for Meg. I would just like to start by asking you how you got where you are today. Kind of what's your background, what's your backstory?
Sure. So how far back do we want to go?
As far back as you want to go.
As far back as I want to go. Okay. Well, I would say as an underlying theme to my background, I was the kind of kid that would read a book at the dinner table, right? While the rest of my family was out to eat, chit-chatting. I was reading my book, and they let me do it because it didn't have the same, the same effect that kids having a tablet today at the table have. Like that's looked down upon. But I think when I was a little kid and I had a book at the table, everyone was like, oh, look at my smart little girl. And I really identified with that, right?
Yeah, it's strange because that's maybe a generational thing, but we were always told, get your head out of that book and go and play outside.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it was encouraged in my household to they loved that I
That is a good thing. That is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that just gives you an idea, I guess, of what kind of kid I was. That didn't stick through my whole childhood, though. I would say in high school, I wasn't very career minded. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to school at all. But I did. The only school I applied to was Ohio State out of a desire to appease my mom. Although what I really wanted to do was move off to California and be independent by myself on the West Coast. That was my goal, but that horrified my mom for what were probably obvious reasons. Yeah, so I applied to Ohio State, and this is going to sound very privileged, but I was absolutely horrified to be accepted because I wasn't expecting that I would be accepted, and then I was, and I went, but I did not graduate from there. I think I enrolled as a classics major.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've had so many majors, it's hard to remember even what order they were all in, but I do believe I enrolled as a classics major. Before classes even started, though, I switched to interior design because I really did truly have no idea what I wanted to do. I had no college.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dropped out by the end of my first quarter, so I went home for Christmas and never returned. I would go on to go to college 4 different times before I finally graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Today I have a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I did my undergrad. I have a Bachelor of Science in Botany, which is sort of what has shaped my path in the latter half of my life.
Again, completely unrelated to the other two subjects.
Yeah, yeah. There was a few in between there. There was like a nursing major. There was an English major. There was I think there was an environmental science major. I jumped around a lot. I was clueless. Not clueless, but just very, not sure.
So were you fairly generic in high school then?
Yeah, I wasn't a very present student in high school. I still got good grades, but I wasn't interested in being there at all. So I'm not sure what it's like there, but we don't really have we just take like general classes in high school in the States. It's not like
you're a bit more specialized. I mean, when I was at school, this is kind of 40, 50 years ago, you were either kind of in the sciences or you're in the arts. It's a bit more mixed up now.
okay.
Certainly.
Yeah, ours is more general.
I mean, we couldn't have jumped around like that, if you like. I mean, I did French and history. There was no way I was going to be able to do physics. A, because I wasn't interested, and B, didn't have the qualifications to do so. I would have been turned down.
Oh, interesting. In high school, they wouldn't have let you?
No, in university of further education.
Oh, okay. I got you. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all the things.
I didn't know how to fail, but I could have done.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I did get my first C ever. I was never interested, but I got good grades, and I finally got my first C, which was horrifying to me in organic chemistry too. So that was my first downfall. Yeah.
So you eventually ended up with
Sorry.
you ended up by a tortured path with a master's.
What was that?
You ended up with a tortured path with a master's.
Yes. Yep. So I went on, so I graduated with an undergrad in botany, which I was really excited about because I love all things plants and all things, you know, in the natural world. But I didn't want to spend my life working in a lab. That I have no interest in that whatsoever. And that's really there's not many routes to take in botany where you can make a decent living without going the route of the lab. So I was, you know, like, what am I going to do next? I still had no idea. And my brother-in-law actually introduced me to the world of orientation and mobility.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is. Most people are not.
In terms of races with compasses and things.
Yeah, okay, exactly. So what it was, I specialized in travel instruction for visually impaired people, specifically children. So that's what my master's degree is in. Yeah, which is what got me to move to New York City, because I finished my graduate program, which was I did everything late, right? So I didn't graduate my undergrad until I was about 25, and then I went to grad school from there and got my first job in New York City working at a school for the blind in the Bronx. I was so excited about it. I was going to have my own office and, you know, la-di-da-di-da, my first big girl job. I spent 10 years working hospitality, like serving and bartending, which I did love, and I credit for learning what I imagine is just about everything there is to know about the human condition behind the bar.
You are probably right. Yes.
Yeah. But I was excited to move on from that because it's not sustainable. You can't, I couldn't do it forever, at least, even though I did enjoy it and I was good at it. But yeah, so I moved to New York, took the job at the school for the blind, and it wasn't what I was led to believe it would be. And so it wasn't a match. My personality is not, I knew I was never meant to work in a school. I don't know what I was thinking moving forward in that route, but it is what it is. I moved to New York City, which I love, and now I'm here. So I moved to New York City. So I'll just give you the whole spiel. I moved to New York City for the new job, immediately got pregnant, which was not in the plan, right?
Yeah.
Worked out all right, but not in the plan. So moved to this new city with no friends or support or family, found out I was pregnant, found out my job I was so excited for was sort of a living nightmare for me at the time. And then, you know, fast forward, had the baby, got married, had the baby, everything is stellar, went on my maternity leave, and realized that there was no way I could go back to a job that I hated and have a daughter that was growing up watching me do something I had no interest in doing, that because how horrible would that be? And then I discovered copywriting, and it checked all my boxes, and I've been obsessed ever since.
How did you discover copywriting then?
So I was at home with a newborn on my lap and spending hours, and I mean hours and hours Googling what I can do working from home to make a decent living. And I think I wound up in someone's funnel and that was it.
So it's a kind of happy coincidence, really.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
It's fascinating the ways that people come to copywriting.
Isn't it? I don't know anyone that was like, oh, I always wanted to be a copywriter.
There are one or two.
Yeah.
But because there are the people that, you know, you hear them all the time that were the born writers that used to read a lot when they were kids and everything. And I know you did, but you didn't consider yourself as a writer, did you?
I did consider myself a writer, but I didn't consider writing a possibility. You know, I didn't consider that I could make any money doing it.
Because I think there's this idea, and I spent a long time, and I mean I'm only talking 2 or 3 years ago now, before I actually considered myself a writer and get comfortable with that, because writer, the word writer covers an awful lot of things. it's like a dancer. You could be a ballerina, you could be a tap dancer, you could be a ballroom dancer, you could be all kinds of things. And I think
Mhm.
writers are the same, because there's this public perception that writers write novels.
Yes, they've got the starving artist trope going on.
Exactly, yeah. You're either a starving artist or you're J.K. Rowling.
Yep, exactly. That's what I believed as a kid.
And there's nothing in between. But we know there's a lot in between, and
The whole world in between.
there's a whole world in between. And I don't know if you found this, but I've found a lot of copywriters get this kind of stigma about the copywriters. Well, they're not real writers, because we're writing for, say, writing for money. We're writing to make money. We
Mhm.
you know, we're in terms of kind of the songwriters of the world. We're writing pop ditties, with Tim Pan Alley.
It's a
Um,
different perception, definitely.
writing for, I can't think of the word now, but we're writing for our lunch, basically.
We're marketers.
And there's no, it's not a noble art. I mean, we both know copywriters that would explode at that particular name. And I'm thinking of one particular, Joanna Weeb, because I've had the conversation with her. Okay, so you find yourself a starving copywriter in New York City, which isn't the cheapest place to be a starving copywriter.
Certainly not. No.
You've got to go start out of the blocks pretty quick.
Yeah, so I didn't quit my job right away. I did return after my maternity leave as
Yeah.
I built my copywriting business on the side, because being an actual starving copywriter was not an option.
No, it's not it's not as romantic as people think it is.
No, certainly not.
So go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so I built my copywriting business on the side. So when I really started to gain traction, so I started as a generalist, as I believe many of us, I don't know about most of us, but many of us do.
Mhm.
And then I joined Rob and Kira's Accelerator. Right? Accelerator.
For the microphone, the Copywriter Club.
Yes.
People that don't know what it is, Copywriter Club is it's a podcast, and it's a Facebook group, and I can't remember which one came first. I think the podcast came first. It's a community of 14,000 copywriters, probably one of the biggest in the world.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, and then the Accelerator program is the basic program where you basically learn to build a copywriting business.
Yep. And that's essentially where I built mine. I had like the rough foundations down, and I understood the gist of things, and I had paying clients when I joined, but during the accelerator was when I niched down to climate tech, which I adore. So I work only with climate tech founders and marketers currently. And yeah, it snowballed from there. I got my first climate tech client right as I graduated from the accelerator. And from there, I was pretty quickly able to quit my full-time job. So that was exciting.
That was last year, wasn't it?
It was, or no, it was, honestly, it was beginning of this year. I just quit my full-time job in January of this year.
But you did the because you did the accelerator cohort after I did.
Oh yeah, I did that August of last year.
Second half of 2021, didn't you? Yeah, 22. I mean,
Yep.
So it's still relatively new, then, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Why climate tech?
So I guess to rewind a little bit, if you would have told me as a kid that I would end up in marketing, I know I would have been horrified, and I don't think I would have believed you. I fancied myself a bit of a hippie growing up. I was, the show Mad Men. There's the ad men, and then there's the bohemians on the side. I definitely related more to the bohemians on the side that believed marketing was the root of evil. So if you would have told me I would have wound up here, I wouldn't have believed that. Then I learned better, and now I understand that is typically not the case. So climate tech made sense for me because, going back to the starving copywriter trope, I had this ideal of working in tech in my mind because I heard the rumors that tech pays the best. Also, my dad, as a little girl, was really very tech obsessed. And I wouldn't call myself tech obsessed, but I think I have that intrigue in me. I think that if my dad were around today, he would be amazed by the tech that exists today. And I think it makes me like appreciate it a little bit more. So I enjoy the field.
I'm speculating here. Presumably, the botany background has got something to do with it because it's a scientific discipline
Mm-hmm.
that teaches you different things. I mean, I've got a history degree, and that teaches me a certain amount of things. One thing I haven't got is a scientific method, which you would do with a botany degree. And also, let's face it, botany is at the forefront of climate tech. Or applications of botany, particularly the work of, I'm thinking of the work of people like Neri Oxman, which is, I know is more biology, that is, but it's kind of using the materials of nature to build technical things. Like replacements for plastic and things like that, which is, I could probably talk to you about that all afternoon, but it's, I find that, I mean, I don't necessarily understand it all, but I find it fascinating because that's the real cutting edge at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I just spoke with a woman the other day that I was drawn to because in her name is escaping me right now, but in her LinkedIn messaging, she really focuses on how tech is going to get us there, right? But nature is still what has the answers. And that's what we need to prioritize and look toward as we build out these, AI-driven technological solutions to save the world. We still need to take our direction from what nature does best because it does do it best.
And it's still here, just about.
And it's still here. Hopefully it will remain. Hopefully we will.
Without necessarily naming any names, what kind of clients do you get involved in? What kind of products do you get involved with?
Yeah, so the bulk of my experience thus far has been in people that work with renewable energy, so things like solar and wind.
Mm-hmm.
I work a bit with the built environment, so like infrastructure for cultivated meat. That's an interesting one. And then a lot of carbon tech, so people that are doing carbon removal and like people that are also making platforms to help the people that are doing carbon removal to help it scale.
And what do you think is the kind of the most exciting pieces of tech around there now then?
Ooh, that's hard. Well, the carbon removal is really amazing, right? Because even if we were to stop all emissions today, which would be a mighty task, we would still be in trouble because all of the carbon in the atmosphere to date, we've already surpassed our limits, correct? And carbon stays in the atmosphere. Forgive me, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it has a really long shelf life. All the carbon we've ever emitted is still in the atmosphere today, which is why we need carbon removal. And it's such a teeny tiny particle that the fact that people were able to figure out how to create the technology that can pluck it out of the atmosphere without plucking anything else out of the atmosphere is just, I think that's awe-inspiring.
One thing I did read about, and I'm slightly going off topic, but one thing I did read about is bioengineered trees.
Yeah.
Basically suck more carbon than normal trees do out, which is a kind of an interesting.
Isn't that amazing? And they get bigger than other trees too and everything. There's so many people doing so many cool things. There's so many things that you wouldn't expect that can be climate related too, right? So I spoke with someone recently. They do they created an AI that is able to detect like nails out of discarded wood. So before that, it's like such a manual, time-consuming task that no one would do it, and all that wood was getting burned or otherwise not used and discarded. And now they have this magical way to take all the metal out of the wood, and we can like repurpose it for new, better uses, and it saves so much from going to waste. And just little things like that. There's so many different things you would never imagine.
Well, again, talking of wood and trees, as it were, there's I think she's saw this on one of the home reno programs or something, but pine pine floors, the pine that you use on floors is not as wide as it used to be
Hmm.
100 years ago because they're cutting trees down earlier. They're cutting.
Yeah.
19th century pine floor will have pieces of pine that are basically twice the size of the current ones, particularly pines, because they're cutting the trees down because they're not letting the trees grow as much.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But perhaps with these gene modified trees, you're going to get bigger trees and bigger planks of wood. So the construction industry is going to. It's the ramifications are quite incredible sometimes.
It is. The thing about the trees is interesting. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with carbon offsets, but they're pretty controversial in the
It's a lot of a bigger. It's like something. It's like plastic recycling. It's one big con.
Yeah, well, so yeah, for the most part. So one of the big issues is one way to buy carbon offsets is to like donate to some company that's planting trees so that the trees will sequester carbon. But then the problem is it's not being regulated how long those trees are allowed to grow for.
Yeah,
So planting the trees, but then they're being cut back down as babies and no carbon is actually being sequestered. So that made me think of it because of the pines.
yeah. There's. I mean, it's an imperfect world, and we
For
are.
sure.
And we have to hope that we are getting better at it because we're recording, you know, record temperatures all out of the world. And I'm still seeing my Twitter feed full of people saying it's one big con.
Yeah, I know. I try to, it's so funny because, most of my LinkedIn network is people that work in climate. And so I try to involve myself in the conversations there. But reading through the comments sometimes is so disheartening because there's still, yeah, there are so many people that get in and just don't believe it. They think it's a big hoax, and that's so crazy to me.
Yes, it is a pity. So, I mean, one thing that I'm really interested in talking to people about, and I think you might have something to say about this, is what is the role of your business as you move forward, and then business generally. And I know I'm probably pushing an open door here in terms of the businesses that you work with, because it's written on their home pages. But there are more than just climate tech businesses working for a better world. And that's kind of, I'm prejudging your answer there because I know what you're going to say. But I'm just interested in how you see things kind of developing in the next 5 or 10 years, because they've come on demonstrably in the last 5 years, and they could kind of go, particularly with the introduction of AI. So what's your role, and what's the role of the people that you may or may not be working with further down the line? Because there may be clients outside the climate tech area that want to kind of feeling guilty or whatever, I don't know, but wanting to get into this space, but not knowing how to do it.
So how do I think things are going to go over the next 3 to 5 years for people?
What's your plans, and then how do you feel that they are going to line up with how the industry is going to change?
Yeah, sure. So climate tech as a whole is still an emerging industry, right? Everyone I work with is a startup. I would even go so far to say as almost everyone in climate is a startup. There's some that are more established, but that's pretty much the lay of the land.
Yeah.
You already predicted this, but obviously everyone I work with their hope is to do good in the world. I think that's every business. I'd like to think that's every business's hope, is that they'll have some sort of positive impact on the world. My goal for my business is to help all of these people that are far smarter than I am, that are able to, suck carbon directly out of the atmosphere.
It's not something we can.
move past the startup stage. The people that I work with, if they're able to move past that startup stage and sort of gain that widespread adoption that they seek, they really do have that power to like actually change. I mean, everyone has the power to change the world for the better, but the people that I work with really,
some have more power than others.
some have more power than others. Like some of these people, they really do have the power to potentially change the trajectory of our future on this planet. And I think that lights me up every day. So that's the goal for my business, is I want to help those people do that.
Because, and it's interesting you said that as well, because you say people that are smarter than you, they may or may not be, but what you give them is something that they haven't got.
Exactly. Yes. Smarter in a different way.
Yeah. From their point of view, you are smarter than them.
That's true.
You know. Yeah, and I suppose it can only go one way now, isn't it? I think have we got to the tipping point with carbon tech now?
You mean like tipping points for
in the sense that it's going to just get bigger and bigger?
The industry, or like the issues that we're facing in climate?
Both really, but I mean, obviously, the issues aren't going away. We know that.
Yeah.
Because it's to a large extent it's linked up to, it's dependent on political will as well.
Yeah. As far as tipping points, as they relate to the problems that we face, I don't think that anyone is very clear on that. I know that scientists, I think the most solid information we have in that regard is that scientists are very worried that we're very close to those tipping points if we haven't reached them already. I don't think that anyone is able to say definitively for certain whether we've reached them or not. But it's looking more and more like we're getting pretty close if we haven't.
We're certainly not far away. Yeah, I mean, well, when I say tipping point, I don't mean the point of no return. I mean the tipping point in terms of the industries, and have they reached a point where they're only going to get bigger and they're not going to fade away?
I think it depends. It varies from company to company. That's hard to say.
Some are going to go to
I hope that many of them will reach that tipping point where they are able to continue on.
Yes, because there's so many different technologies. It's and I mean, it's almost like we're in a kind of a lean startup mode that we were kind of 10, 15 years ago, where we're trying all these things and some work and some don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I did of a company using wanting to replace plastics with something using insect dung. Good luck extracting or even identifying insect dung. But there's all kinds of things. I mean, certainly in this country, it's difficult to find plastic bags, bin liners, and things like that aren't compostable now.
Yeah, see, there are so many little things. That's the thing with climate, is there's no one thing that's going to work. I like to say that this is going to require an all of the above approach. So it's my hope that as many of these companies as possible will thrive.
It's a kind of very pie in the sky technology, but if it does happen, it's going to change the world. Do you ever get involved in anything involving nuclear fusion?
Not yet, but it's my dream to get involved with
somebody. Is that is the magic bullet.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's absolutely intriguing. Not yet, but hopefully sometime soon.
I've always heard it said it's 50 years away, but it was 50 years away 50 years ago.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, these timelines, all the timelines, right? So tipping points for climate, but also our ability to find these solutions, all these timelines are shrinking. We're getting closer and closer, which is good when it comes to things like nuclear fission.
Yeah. And I think perhaps the other thing is related to that is quantum computers, because what we need is the calculating power, and quantum computers, if we ever get there, will change that world completely, just like AI. I mean, the AI will be driven by the quantum computers, I imagine. I sound like I know what I'm talking about here. I have no idea.
Yeah, my knowledge starts to get limited when we broach those topics, but it is mind-boggling to consider. It's fun to imagine that the scene 5 years from now will probably be almost unrecognizable, even to just what it is today.
Yeah, it
I
would.
think I don't know that, but
Yes, so it's an exciting world, really.
it is. It is. I like to think so.
So would you say? I suppose you have to be optimistic, don't you?
Yes. Yeah, you certainly do. Some days it's harder than others, but I do believe that maintaining hope is the key. Maintaining a realistic hope is the key.
So if I was thinking about a tech startup, and I don't know, I couldn't tell you what the idea was, but I mean, just say something to replace plastics or something like that. As a writer, as a marketer, what would your advice be?
Do a tech startup?
Yeah. What would I do? What would I have to do to? I mean, imagine I've got all the funding I need, but in terms of the message that I need.
Yeah. Well, the message that you need, so dependent, obviously would be dependent on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
But let me think about what I want to say here. I think it's important to be realistic about what it is that you're doing and say it in as clear as terms as possible. I would act as if you were explaining it to not a colleague, a friend, a trusted friend who does not work in tech. You want them to understand what it is you're talking about, and you want to make it clear why the thing that you're doing is important and what the really big, because it is a really big problem, what the really big problem is that you're solving and how you're going to solve it. It really is just as simple as making that very clear and very accessible.
Well, on that note, I will go off and get my funding. I'll come back to you.
That sounds good.
It's been lovely talking to you. And I think because these issues are really important, and we need to talk about these more and more and more. So if anybody wants to get hold of you, where can they get you? I mean, I'll put some links in the description, but you've got a website and your socials.
I do, yeah. So my website is just megkendall.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the only social I can really keep up with. And my name is Meg Kendall on there.
Lovely. Meg, thanks very much. And well,
Thank you for having me.
Good luck to the rest. To the rest of
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, that was Meg. Great conversation again. If you'd like to work with her, get in contact with her, I'll put all the details down in the description. If you'd like to talk on one of these interviews, again, just there's my email address is in the description again. Let's have a chat. If you found this useful and you want to listen to more, well, just do the old like and subscribe thing. And I'll speak to you next time.